Hi, Mrs. Cressy. This is Mikhail. The question I am facing here is the men deal with the uncertainty, fear, and death around them in sometimes surprisingly tender, irreverently funny, or horrifyingly brutal ways. Choose three characters from the stories to examine how these characters respond to their circumstances and the men around them. What conclusions can you draw about men and war through these examples? Jimmy Cross is the lieutenant of his platoon, and he has a lot of guilt on his shoulders. A lot from Ted Lavender's death in the beginning, where he feels he is responsible for it, but also he will not stop the search for Kiwa's body because he really feels like it is his fault and his bad leadership that led them to the field of mud where they lost Kiwa's body. Cross knows that it was a bad decision to stay in that field in case of an artillery strike because they would have no cover. To make things worse for Jimmy, his soldiers blame the death of Kiwa on him because they said that he was the one that camped them there, and he should have known better to put them in the middle of a field where you could sink easily. But he tries to send a letter to Kiwa's family, and he tries to make it sentimental, but he really can't put what he wants in words onto the paper. So he really feels guilty about all of this, and he really feels like he owes a bigger debt to Kiwa's family than what he has given. So, on the other end, Boker, I think his name is Norman Boker, he at the same time feels really guilty because he was really good friends with Kiwa, and he wanted to show him a picture of his family or his girlfriend, and he turns on a flashlight, which he knows he shouldn't do, and artillery strike was landed right upon their position, probably because someone saw the light and gave them the position. So, as this whole struggle comes through with the artillery, he sees Kiwa go under, and one more artillery round close by just sweeps him under the mud, and Kiwa's body is lost. Another example that I am using for Azar's cruelty and total wrong take on death is on page 129, where he notices this girl dancing after her family had just died, burned in their house. And Azar is making fun of her and mocking her by dancing in irreverent ways and not exactly the way that she was dancing, just to poke fun. So Dobbins, throughout this whole time, is growing annoyed by his cruel gestures and picks him up and says, "You better dance right." And so this really shows how Azar is really nasty and negative to his enemies, but Dobbins really feels a connection with the civilians in the area because yeah, that's Dobbins for you. Dobbins is a very gentle giant. Altogether, I really feel as if death can be taken in three ways: as a brutal, nasty, negative way, such as Azar takes it, which there are always those creeps in the world, but also Dobbins with the soft, gentle, loving care for people, and in Jimmy's case, the pressure of guilt on your life, and apparently death, which he has to live with from all these decisions he's made and people he's lost. He's going to have to live with that guilt for the rest of his life. Lieutenant Jimmy Cross really puts his men's life in his own hands, which I think is unreasonable for a responsibility, because you can't really control your men at all times. So Jimmy losing Ted Lavender, he really feels like it's his fault. Ted Lavender burns his lover's pictures, Martha, and because he really feels as if thinking about her was the reason for Ted Lavender's death. So he really takes that responsibility. Azar is especially brutal in a lot of ways. He pokes jokes and makes fun at Kiwa's death and says it's ironic and funny. Because they're in like a crap field. Because Kiwa is Native American, he pokes fun at him, saying it's funny that he dies in a sewer field, because it's just like another one of those cowboy movies where another redskin bites the dirt, and he pokes fun, but Dobbins and his fellow companions set him straight, and even though Dobbins is such a big man, he has a lot of soft feelings of the world and death. Another one of Azar's acts that really got my gut was when he strapped Ted Lavender's dog to a claymore and blew it up, which I think was totally irresponsible and unnecessary. So death to him is just a game, and he really thinks nothing of it, and he really has no soul. That's what I feel like, because of his brutal acts that he commits throughout the whole book, and how he takes death in a non-serious manner. It is disgusting. It's starting to get late here, so I think I'm gonna wrap it up. It's been around 10 minutes. But I really want to explain how the men and war can be concluded through the examples. Quoting that from the question. Well, I conclude with saying that real men in real wars today are probably leaning more towards, sadly, Azar, because they have the choice to be there, unlike the Vietnam War, where they were drafted and they didn't really have a choice. Well, people like Dobbins are probably the least likely to be in real wars today, because if they were that soft, then I don't think they would want to be in combat unless they are forced into it. And obviously there are always going to be people like Jimmy Cross, because if someone dies, then you're always going to have some sort of guilt, like, oh, I should have, or I wish I had. But in all reality, there are probably a lot more men like Azar in the wars today. Wars today aren't always going to be like the Vietnam War, because the Vietnam War in a lot of people's eyes was unnecessary. Actually, all wars in some people's eyes are probably unnecessary, but in the Vietnam especially, people were very strongly against it, because they didn't have the choice to be there, and it wasn't for a real reason. The real reason was France was trying to get rubber from the trees. And America just said, oh, we're going to try to stop communism. But I'm going to conclude with, I think within Tim O'Brien's storytelling, even if it wasn't real, I really feel as if Dobbins, Azar, and Lieutenant Jimmy Cross were great examples of three totally different perspectives on death and how they deal with it and with the people around them. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you very much. Goodbye.